Greetings and salutations, internet distance. This is Wolfphototech, and here we are with another delightful video. This time I'm going to talk about Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse. This MSRP's for $85 approximately. It's typically sold a little bit less than that on Amazon and most other sites. Now, this is what Wizards of the Coast likes to refer to as a box set, which in case is technically not the case. Well, it's a box because it has like multiple sides, but this is not a box set. This is a box set, and if you want to know what it's in a box set, go to my look at, say, like Star Frontiers, my Star Frontiers video, or my other starter set videos, and that will get you a good idea of what's actually a box set. Now, important to note that this is substantially more expensive than this when it was even brand new, and also I bought that cheaper than in this. Fun enough as it is. Each one of these books ranges all over the place in price. Not price, but size of pages. So when I get to it, I get to it. Now, important to note that, as I said, there's 3 books in here. They're all a hardcover, which personally is not entirely necessary when you have a slipcase. Wizards of the Coast probably could have saved people money if they went with soft cover and went with a slipcase. It's one of those weird situations where Wizards of the Coast, you know, they use cheap binding in all their books. However, they go with the expensive, with the hardcover, so you end up with a situation with it's meant to feel and look as if it's really durable, but when you actually know what's going on, a lot of their books are actually really cheaply made. But this one is actually not the worst. It's not great. Now, it's important to note, I was going to point out this fact, that this right here, this is the main book. This is the player/campaign setting book, which covers the basic lore of Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse. Incidentally, the name of the book, Sigil and the Outlands, is truly what this is all about. In fact, calling it Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse is generally misleading because very little content in this book or in these books actually is about the other planes. Weirdly enough, the Dungeons Master's Guide, awesome book by the way, actually is a better resource for the planes. It's a little more in a rush, but hey. It's this book is about 96 pages long. There happens to be in the very back two-sided map that's attached in here. By the way, this right here, this is all of the information that's related to Spire really in this book. And considering that the Spire is this structure that's in the middle of the Great Wheel, in the middle of this wheel, there's a spire. At the very top of the spire, it continues all the way up into the clouds. There is Sigil up there. And funny enough, there's very little information on the spire, even though that is a major point of connection between the two. Weird. Also in the backside here is the map of Sigil, the City of Doors. It is a artistic stylized map, and it is important to note that it points out all the really important locations, but gives no information about anything else other than the important locations. So there you go. Which is the same case is with the Outlands, or the Great Wheel. or the little wheel, whatever. The Great Wheel of Cosmology is interconnected with this because all these gate towns connect to various other planes. And this is a really good demonstration of what this set actually covers. Because it actually is entirely focused around Sigil and the Outlands, and extremely little about the actual planes. So the name of the box set, Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse, I will repeat it again, is a completely misleading statement. Or nearly completely misleading statement. This is basically the tiny little starting point of a Planescape campaign box set. And everything else is in everything else and in the past. So, first and foremost, we go into the table of contents. Chapter 0 is contents, infinite doors, there's to adventure. It explains what is Planescape, using the book, the three truths, center of the multiverse, unity of rings, rule of three. Chapter 1 is character options, which is basically consists of 2 backgrounds, which are decent, and then a total of 6 feats, or to be 6 feats. There's Planar Scion of Outer Planes, and then there's Agent of Order, Baleful Scion, Cohort of Chaos, Outlands Envoy, Planar Warden, and Righteous Inheritor. Actually, I should count those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's actually 7 feats, which is actually a divine number. There's 2 spells, Gate Seal and Warp Sense, which are really only of worth when you're playing an actual planar adventure. And then you have 3 magic items, Minmer, Portal Compass, and Sensory Stone, which yet again are all items that are very important for planar adventures, but not so much for other stuff, with the exception of the Sensory Stone, which is then good for conveying information. Then you have Chapter 2, Sigil, the City of Doors, which takes up the majority of the book. And then Chapter 3, the Outlands, which takes up the last little bit of the book besides the maps. And that right there pretty much just covers this whole box set right there. This is, as I said before, is Sigil and the Outlands, not Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse. A good chunk of the book, the tiny little section in the front where it is the player options. The feats are decent. The backgrounds are okay. The spells are specific to a campaign, so are the items, but the items are slightly more useful than the spells. With the exception of the Portal Compass, unless otherwise. But yet again, when it comes to magic items, that is a thing your Game Master hands out, not the players. So to be quite frank, this box set, I'm going to just throw this preliminary score of 4 players right out here right now. It is basically a 2-star. It is like, oh, this you have at least a book of learning about Planescape. Incidentally, there's entire YouTube channels that specialize in teaching about Planescape. So, hey, if you want to learn about Planescape, you either can go on Wikipedia, find a YouTube channel that has a ton of lore on Planescape. Vastly cheaper than buying this book, which then you can't even buy the book alone. You have to buy the box set. So that's like $90 out the door for you. So it's a 2-star. It is not a 1-star because it's not completely defective or damaged or gives you horrible advice or sections of it is destroyed. It's a 2-star. It's like right between like and it's completely defective. Sigil, the City of Doors, basically just goes through basic alterations of magic, how magic is affected by Sigil. The Lady of Pain controls who can teleport in and out of Sigil. The various services, locales of Sigil. There's inside of Sigil, there's various gateways to various other planes. So if you are quite good at hunting around, you can find those. However, that is basically typically what this box set is entirely stops at, is the whole, oh, this is a gateway realm to many different planes and realities. But that's it. You got a little section on the Lady of Pain. You got various factions. By the way, all the information for the factions is just the basics. It's literally just the basics. You got a little section on minor factions. You got various sections on various wards within Planescape. Incidentally, the maps are highly stylized, artistic maps. It's kind of nice and neat, except for the fact that they're of the size and structure, and there's no grid lines or anything, so you would have to add grid lines to them. They're not entirely useful for any gameplay whatsoever. Nice little vignette scene. Yet again, same thing, just a really basic artsy map. You could use it to keep track of stuff for your keep track of your players, or just use it to describe, but you can't really use it to actually make it into a big map, because you would have to make new boxes. You have to regrid the whole thing. You go through various wards, yet again. And then you go all the way to Chapter 3, which is the Outlands, which basically covers the basic areas of the Outlands as well as the gate towns. The gate towns go to different planes of existence, such as Mechanus, or the Nine Hells, or the Abyss. And each gate town is literally just 2 pages, where each ward was somewhere like 4 to 6 pages. The core focus of the book is really Sigil. First and foremost, that's the highest point of value. And even then, it is just like a thick crust pizza. It's a thick crust pizza, thick. It's this wide, it's a thick crust pizza. It's not a deep dish. It's not a lasagna or anything. It's just a thick crust pizza, and you have to share it with a bunch of people. And then in the case of the gate towns and all the other areas within the Outlands, each area is essentially a personal size thin crust pizza. Like, you go to the grocery store and you go through the pizza aisle and you're like, see those $1 pizzas? They're just personal size pizzas about this big, and they're just thin crusts with a few toppings on it. That's basically what each gate town section is. It's literally just 2 pages. If I literally hold up the book, and pause long enough, you can literally read everything about the gate town. And then I could turn a page and you have an entire another gate town to read entirely through. So the first problem is, the positive of this is it gives you a game master a starting point to take off with an adventure or a visit to such a town. However, you would have to use the other book to fill in the next half of this stuff. Same thing for the players. It's just the super basics, just outright. And then if we jump a few pages this way and get past the gate towns, we have all the tiny little sections. And it's just like a paragraph, 2 paragraphs of all the other sections. You happen to have the spire, which is that really big structure that sits in the middle of the big wheel, of the Outlands. It just has 1, 2, 3 paragraphs to it. It doesn't really tell you much about it. It mentions the inhabitants that live on it, and it mentions the fact that there's magic rings of suppression radiating from it, but it doesn't really explain much else from that. So there you go. And then we go on to the next book, which is Mort's Planar Parade. This book feels incredibly light. This is kind of like one of those, the Monsters Compendiums on D&D Beyond, where there's only like a few monsters in each one, and you can you get them for free, or you spend $4.99 to get like 5 or 12 monsters. This is a total of 51 pages, which is a lot shorter than Spelljammer Adventures Through Space, Boo's Menagerie. However, there is a rather large section at the very beginning that is entirely dedicated to modifications. This is just basic information. Multiversal Menagerie and stat block listing for each one of these. By the way, it would have been really nice if they added an extra column right here with the page number for these monsters, because this is thin enough as it is, but still you probably want to go and add an extra level of value to this, because you really need it. You have basic planar influences for each creature. So if you were in, say, Arcadia, these are the typical characteristics that are tied to creatures that are living in Arcadia, Beastlands, and so forth. Just a few paragraphs here and there for some modifications, little template. Super simple templates needs for creatures. So you can take a goblin and stick them in Limbo. Or you can have them in Kasiri, a Kasiri goblin. And you add those modifications to it, and that's it. And then you have a section on the Denizens of the Outlands, which is a bunch of roll tables for figuring out some fun stuff. And then you go right into the beast, which starts at the various creatures, which starts at page 16. There's only a mix of, you got a few angelic beings, you got a few demonic. You have a Baron Barrier Warden. By the way, there are numerous races in Spelljammer, this being one of them, as well as, say, little mice people, and you got the Moldrons and a few others. This was a good opportunity to put stat blocks for those various races or species in a book. However, they did not do that. They did not put any races in this book, although there's numerous races that it could have easily done so. They didn't. And you'll see some more of them in the future. You got some cranium rat squeakers, which is basically a modified variation of cranium rats. This actually does occur a few times in this book, where you have a few creatures that are just basically, oh, this is the Planescape version of this creature. You got demonoids and various other fun fiends. And you also have some aberrations. So you have a nice little sprinkling of a few more options added to it. Oh, you got Ickwheels, and Arvoil, and a Mustavel. So, they could have easily turned these into actual races you could play in Planescape, but they didn't. They just have the monster stat blocks for them. You got a construct. You have another large fiend. You actually have a pretty good collection of fiends and constructs in here. But of course, that is a good chunk of what the adventure is all about. And you just have a Razorvine Blight, which is basically an updated Blight. And a few more. You got Time Dragons. Oh, this is a good little point here. They only have Ancient, Adult, Young, and Wormling Time Dragons. They don't have Great Worm Time Dragons in here. They should have had Great Worm Time Dragons in here. It would have just literally added another 2 pages to the whole book, which would have actually been very much needed, by the way. Then you have like a Varighoul Reflection, which is a new variant of Varighouls, which is from the Monster Manual. You have a few more guards and members of various organizations within Sigil. Yet again, this book is heavily focused on providing just the stuff that shows up in the adventure, and that's it. So there we go. Which leads us into the next thing. There's also handy dandy chart roll tables in the back for encounters and various other things. Now we go to A Turn at Fortune's Wheel, which is the adventure. I'm not going to go terribly in depth in this. If you are a player in Planescape campaign, I would highly advise quickly turning back. Otherwise, this can actually potentially ruin your experience in it. But I'm also going to keep this really short, as in some game masters really enjoy learning as they go along. But basically, let's start. This is your warning, players. Mute the video, and then put it at 2 times speed. You need to speed through it. But anyways, the key and point of this is there's a fundamental glitch. Your party members have died, and they come back to life for some weird reason. They're essentially glitch people because the multiverse cannot quite figure out what to do with them. So, for your players, you have your players create 3 or more characters, and then you want to like have a consistent theme in those characters, like they like beautiful clothing, or they are tall, or they have hair ornaments, or something like that. A consistent concept tied in. By the way, right here is that centaur-like race called the Burial. I cannot pronounce the name right. This is right here where it's talking about, have your players make a bunch of characters and have a common theme run through them, and one of these may in fact be the true version of that character. However, they decide that when they get towards the end of the end of the adventure. Now, I do not know why they chose to use a race that is not in the book, and they could have really added some races to the book, and this would have added a bunch of value to the Planescape. They also really needed more monsters, not the bare minimum. I don't know what's with Wizards of the Coast. It's all about presentation, and yet all the substance is so thin. But anyways, they don't even have an option of this race unless you want to like homebrew this race into the campaign. Use a centaur as a standard or your foundation for them. That's probably the easiest bet. But as you go through the adventure, if the character happens to die in the adventure, the other variant shows up either the night that they take a long rest, or shortly after combat is through. So there you go. So you can have like a bard, you can have a paladin, you can have a druid. It could be by the same player, and they simply just rotate and create new characters periodically, going off of that whole theme, keeping in mind that there should be a central theme between all of them. A reasonable point of like, this may be an alternate version of this character at some point. By the way, if all the characters die in combat, you could have the whole thing end right there, because it stipulates that the character should not show up before the end of combat. And if the new version of the character does show up, the glitch character that is dead on the ground becomes inert and cannot be revived, but may actually recycle back in later on. So you can keep cycling the same character back in to the selection if you really wanted to. Now this starts out, if you played the Planescape video game, you start in the mortuary, because you apparently were dead. You get to hang out with Mort, and you go through the mortuary and stuff like that. When you leave the mortuary, you happen to come across an individual, and they throw some Planescape slang at you, and so forth. You go out from there. You adventure through various other places in the town, trying to figure out, hey, what's up with Sigil? Figuring out what's up with me. You eventually make it to a very powerful individual, and they send you out on a little quest, and you try to figure out. You go to a walking castle, and you keep going on from there. Just adventuring, visiting each little place as you go along. And suddenly it's just simply, you go to the various gate towns throughout the Outlands after you're done venturing through Sigil a little bit and so forth. And it fundamentally comes down to you trying to figure out what's going on, and you basically visit a location, spend a little time there, do a few things, and roll on from there. And then you eventually come back around, and you get a time jump a little further into the future. Your levels jump up suddenly, and boom, now you're level 17. In which case you discover, there's stuff up with the Moldrons, and boom. And then all of a sudden, the true version of your character is determined at the very end, and you go on from there. Generally, the best thing I could say about this is it's interesting. There's some really neat ideas, and there's also a bunch of homages to a whole bunch of stories, science fiction, and fantasy. However, it is strongly very much a tour campaign where you basically start at one point and you go to another point, and you basically do a thing and you just jump from one point to another, just doing a thing at each point, and you're on a tour throughout a whole bunch of locations throughout the Outlands, and that's basically it. Now, there you go. So, I do say that there is actually some potential for this adventure, and it might actually turn out to be really good. I have yet to run it, but from what I have gathered going through it, it's generally just has the feel of you're on a tour, and you just happen to be visiting different locations, just trying to figure out stuff. Now on to the Game Master screen. There's nothing special inside the box, but there you go. I have a lot of art credits that I never really made a whole lot of use of, but I can tell you this is a nice Game Master screen. or Dungeon Master screen. However, it is important to note that even though all the little pieces in here are really nice and interesting, there is some issues with foreground, midground, and background, where some objects feel like they're out of proportion with each other. So it's more prevalent on this side of the Dungeon Master screen. This is a nice little shiny effect up here, but it does feel like some of the stuff that it should technically be closer to like the forward midground is closer than it should be. Like this method right here, this magma method or flame method, he feels like he is closer. And you know the size of methods, he should be smaller than that, being the distance away he is. But, you know, it feels like he is closer than this, even though this is right up in front of your foreground, as well as the Modrons. The Modrons are actually pretty close to the body size of the method itself. So I guess you can say it does look like it's further back. But, you know, there you go. It's really nice. It looks really good as long as you don't study it too closely. By the way, incidentally, this is supposed to be infinitely high. So the fact that you can see Sigil sitting up there is a stretch. But, hey. It does. I do say that actually does work still. Some of the characters up here, you know, this angel right up here is a lot closer than this one, but this one is almost about the same height as this one, just a little darker in tone. But these do actually get smaller as they go away. So there's just a little, just being slightly off in distance relationship. And by the way, this method is actually in the foreground. So it actually, when you look at this one, it looks more obvious. This is a simple problem of the fact that that's a hot color and that's a cold color. And hot colors naturally will jump out at you and look more close than they actually are. But you have all the important characters throughout the whole thing. You go on to the inside. You have a nice selection of all the essential rules, but they also did something really nice where they actually put in new artwork for each one. Like Blinded, you have 3 cranium rats here, you got Grappled, you have a tentacle coming through a portal. You have a tiefling down here for Frightened instead. Got a Modron right here for Unconscious, and so forth. And you got all the essential stuff on, all the basic stuff on this side. And then you have on this side right here, this stuff right here is fairly useful for the campaign or the little adventure in Fortune's Wheel, as it has a encounter table for Sigil as well as a counter table for the Outlands, ascendant factions of Sigil, as well as wards of Sigil and Gate Towns information right here with a quick little reference right there. It would have been more useful if this column right here for the Gate Towns of the Outlands contained page numbers for when they show up in the adventure, as well as when they show up in the Sigil and Outlands book. That would have made it much more easy for the Game Master or Dungeon Master to quickly reference each one of those things. Okay. Now, right over here on this last panel right here, this is, by the way, a 4 panel, as you can tell, but I just folded up 2 sections. This section right here is pretty much just post-game. So at level 17, or if you divert off the adventure, or if you want to use this as a campaign setting, you happen to have a table for various doorways or portals to various other locations within Sigil and out of Sigil and so forth, and to various other places. Still, that works. It's nice overall. It's a bit on the dark side for it. I think this should have been brighter. The artwork. It might have that if it was brighter, it might have actually helped with spatial relationship in it as well. Okay. For Game Master or Dungeon Master, this is probably sitting around that. Now, if you really want to play a Planescape setting in 5th edition, I guess this is going to have to be like a 3.75 star or a 3.5. I'm going to have to actually run the adventure at some point, Turn of a Fortune's Wheel, to actually be able to give a concrete score on that. But overall, there is enough information here for a Game Master who is good at bullshitting, or in other words, a clean version of that is called improvising, to actually be able to work their way through, because there is enough information for each of the gate towns and for Sigil itself for someone who is really creative to add on to it very effectively and actually make it into something really good. However, for someone who is not very good at improvising and who really needs to have their organization worked out, it is basically like eating one of those personal pizzas and you're starving. So, for a person who is really good at... I should revise my score for Game Masters or Dungeon Masters. For a person who is capable of improvising, who really likes to research, and can crank out a bunch of stuff, just as long as they have some kind of foundation to work off of. You know, they jazz up their pizza very well. This is a 3.75 star set. For a Game Master who is not good at jazzing up a pizza, this is basically a 3 star at best. It might be a 2.75 star. Because for a Game Master that is not capable of improvising very quickly and inventing a bunch of stuff, and then or doing a lot of research on top of it, this is basically just one of those thin crust pizzas yet again in personal size. You're going to eat the whole thing, and there's a good chance you might still be hungry. It's just that simple. So, yeah, it ranges between a 3 star and a 3.75 star. There's a bunch of quality of life updates that should have been added into the Game Master screen or the monster book or this or that. There should have been a few more creatures in it. There should have been some races added into the book, at least to give it some value for players. The feats are neat. The feats are literally the best thing in the book for players. Everything else is downhill from there. Feats on top, background, which is tied into the feats, and then you have spells at the 2 star point and magic items at 2 stars. And it's yet again just like Spelljammer in Space. It is just enough to get you started into it, but it's nowhere nearly enough to get you really going into it. And considering the history of Wizards of the Coast when it comes to something like this, we're going to get like Spelljammer. We're going to get like this is going to be like Spelljammer or something like that, or Dragonlance, where it is just the basic stuff, an adventure, and that's it. And then we're going to just sit and wait for them to come out with some more stuff, and they just don't. This is supposedly the core foundation of what 5th edition is about, which was not entirely apparent at all throughout 5th edition. It really was Forgotten Realms for 5th edition. This might actually be the starting point for D&D 2024, the 50th anniversary edition, which is what I'm calling it, or 5.5 or 6th edition, depending on what comes out. But if this is the new starting point, they're really going to have to add a whole bunch of new stuff to this just to make it, like, oh, besides the afterthought that Spelljammer was, or issues on top of that. Incidentally, if you notice, this is sitting on top of another box. I have been thinking of this is on a side point. This is, I should grab that, set that on top of there, get this up higher. I've been thinking about what I'm going to do if I get to 500 subscribers or 1,000 subscribers. I might just take Sassy for a puppy walk around Lake Geneva for 500 subscribers, or unbox this at 500 subscribers and save Sassy's walk for 1,000. But this happens to be a completely intact new Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd edition core set in plastic, never opened. So if you want me to do this, cover this for my 1,000 subscriber mark or my 500 subscriber mark, go ahead and say so in the comments. Thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful weekend, a magnificent month, and see you next time. Yet again, this has never been opened. This is intact. Thank you. Have a delightful day.